3 in conference play. UCLA, also Big Ten bound, is 6-9 in conference in the overall, and 1-3 in conference play. Cal, ACC bound, 5-10 and 1-3 in conference. And Oregon State is 9-6 and 1-3 in conference play. So this conference, albeit is dying, is a real fun one this year, Brett. And you got all sorts of talented teams here, just back and forth. It's just a real brawl here. So tell me what you liked, what you've seen from this conference so far, who you like, and who's disappointed you so far.
Yeah, there's exactly one thing I'm going to miss about the Pac-12, and that is the fact that you can never watch any of their games. Pac-12 network sucks, but other than that, it's really fun, really entertaining to watch. I'm going to miss it for sure. But I think you can't talk about Pac-12 without starting with Arizona. Just in terms of the eye test for me, they are, and this pains me to say because I despise Arizona, but I think they might just be the most complete team I've seen in the country. They have elite guard play, really solid big men, really solid depth. They just don't have a weakness that I've seen, other than if a team like Stanford goes out and shoots 64% from three. That's about the only way something like an Arizona loss when they shouldn't lose is going to happen. So I think that's where you got to start. I think they're winning the regular season title, no problem. And I think everything else is a race for second place. Moving into that, the Ducks have been a surprise. They were not especially convincing in non-conference play, but they've really stepped it up in conference. So that has surprised me. Arizona State are complete frauds. Bobby Hurley will be fired by the end of this season. They have won some fairly easy conference games to start. That will not continue. And moving down the line, I obviously got to talk about my Buffaloes. They're having a rough go right now. That was the single most demoralizing loss to Arizona on Thursday that I've ever witnessed as a Colorado fan. I'll be fair to them and say that they were down 2 of their 3 best players due to injury, but you can't lose by 47 points. I don't care where, against who you have, it doesn't matter. So that's rough, and they followed that up with a really brutal loss to Arizona State yesterday. But I think as they get their guys healthy and as they come back, I don't know what the status of Cody Williams is. I don't know when he'll be back. I don't know how healthy Tristan da Silva will be going forward. But I think as they get their guys back come March at the latest, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And if they're hitting their threes, which is always a question with them, I think they've got a shot at beating just about anybody. You move on down. I've been impressed by Utah. Their big man, I think his name is Carlson, is really something. He's dangerous and is a really difficult matchup. I think they're going to do better than a lot of people think. And you look at Stanford. We're going to talk about Stanford a little later because I think Jared Haas should have been gone already. Stanford year in and year out has elite talent because they're Stanford, and they do nothing with it. They blew a 10-point lead in the last 5 minutes to Arizona State a week ago. They have multiple former guys that are doing far, far better on new teams now. You look at Harrison Ingram, you look at Cormac Ryan, and the list could go on. So I think that Stanford will repeat their previous process of having immense talent and just being poorly coached, and finished middle to bottom of the pack. But I think that it's going to be entertaining and surprising. And like Jackson was saying about the SEC, a little bit self-cannibalizing. I think that not as many Pac teams as deserve to make it to the tournament this year will make it. But I think that it's a strong conference top to bottom, and deserves to be talked about a little more than it is.
I think there's two main storylines when it comes to the Pac-12. The first one has to be Arizona. I think it's a cakewalk for them to win this conference. There aren't any clear rivals there. I mean, you've got Arizona State at 4-0, but they're, like Brett said, I agree that they're complete frauds. They got completely outclassed by Northwestern when I saw them play at the Footprint Center out in Phoenix. Arizona completely dismantled Alabama out in Phoenix a couple weeks ago, and that was after going down pretty early by, I want to say, over 10 points in the first half. They came back and won that game by 13. Caleb Love was probably the most high-profile transfer of anyone in the transfer portal this past cycle. I think Arizona wins this conference by 3 to 5 games. And then on the other hand, I think the biggest storyline in the conference outside of Arizona that enough people probably aren't talking about is UCLA and Mick Cronin. They're 6-9, and they're at the bottom of the Pac-12 standings. And this was the team that was in the Final Four just 3 seasons ago, and they've completely fallen from grace. They've gone from being one of the most storied programs to, you have to ask yourself, is Mick Cronin on the hot seat? And people are saying, maybe he's a potential candidate for that Louisville opening, which we'll probably talk about at some point on this podcast. But it's just astounding to see what's going on at UCLA. They have a really young team, and I think most people would tell you that Mick Cronin's a good coach, but they just do not have the dogs to compete in the Pac-12, which is shocking for a program of UCLA's stature at this point. I think they're going to finish under 500. I don't see them turning it around. They haven't shown any signs of progress, any signs of life. They had a terrible loss to Cal State Northridge, and then they've just completely floundered in Pac-12 play, losing some close games. And you have to ask yourself, is Mick Cronin the guy to, continue on at UCLA if he finishes under 500 this year?
I think that's a really valid point there. I mean, they were supposed to be really good this year, and you can't lose to Cal State Northridge if you're UCLA in basketball. That is just inexcusable. You should never lose to Cal State Northridge. But I think he will take another job. I don't think he'll get fired. I think he'll just take another job, like a Louisville job or somewhere like that. And if not, then I don't know. He'll have to lead them into the Big Ten, and that'll be a different task within its own. But my thoughts on the Pac-12. I think Arizona is the definite favorite. I just don't understand. I don't understand them at times. Losing to 18 points at Stanford is certainly a decision. And they did do that. And it's not like Stanford has this raucous crowd. I mean, it's hard enough to get them into the doors. So, I mean, that one was very confusing to me. And the FAU, which that's a different story. The Owls are disappointing me. But outside of that, they've looked really good. I mean, they like you said, Colorado was dealing with some injuries, but they blew them out, blew Utah out, and they should realistically win the rest of their games on the schedule. I don't see much else happening there, but I'd like to take a second to talk about two things. And the first one, I'll go with Stanford. If they don't plan on getting serious in basketball, they will be in last place in the ACC every year. They will go winless in that conference. They will be dang near the bottom every year. I mean, unless I'm missing something,
You're missing Cal. I think Cal.
Oh, my bad. Cal. I was about to get into that. At least they made a coaching scene. They hired Mark Madsen from Utah Valley. And Utah Valley should have made the tournament last year had it not been just a bizarre conference finish. I didn't even get to see it. It was like at 2:00 in the morning. But Brett, you got something to add?
Yeah, just jumping in there. That was an absolute misstep on Stanford's part. Going back to my opinion that Haas should be out. Madsen played for Stanford. He was a fantastic coaching hire for Cal. And they should have gotten Haas out of there and hired him, and they very much missed the boat on that. So just wanted to throw that one in there.
Yeah, I was definitely going to bring that up because Madsen's a Stanford alum. Correct me if I'm wrong. So they were just like, you know what? We like being 7-7. So you know what? Granted, that's what they got. So
they'll have no issue hiring him away from Cal if he has any sort of success on on the bright side. If you're a Stanford fan, he played there, and Stanford probably has more athletic resources than Cal if you look at their athletic department top to bottom. So,
yeah.
if you want to spin it on its head and look at it on the bright side, but at the same time, it would be a little tough hiring a coach away from your crosstown rival.
No, yeah, I agree. But if they plan on being if they plan on playing good basketball, which doesn't seem very likely, for reference for Stanford's losses, they lost to Santa Clara, who hasn't been good in the WCC. As I have said earlier, I do follow it. They lost in double overtime to Arkansas, which, Jackson, you should just feel ashamed that you went to double overtime with Stanford in basketball. Maybe in the
That was one of the worst games I've ever watched. That was so painful.
And then they lost to Michigan, whose coach is well on the hot seat, Juwan Howard. And then they lost by 22 points to Northern Iowa. Stand up Summit, Missouri Valley Conference. Almost at the Summit League, sorry. Missouri Valley Conference. Stand up Northern Iowa. And they lost to San Diego State, fine. But it's just a mess there for their basketball program. But nevertheless, that was my first thing, was ranting about Stanford basketball, because I don't have any problem with Stanford. I enjoy their athletics, and I respect them definitely as one of the best institutes in America academically. And number two, for my thing, and I know some people, and I understand for the Pac-12 sakes as a conference, but that next year's Big 12 is going to be loaded. I mean, Arizona is always good. Let's get that straight. Under Tommy Lloyd, they've been really good. And Arizona State, like you said, I think they'll have a new coach. I agree. Colorado seems to be having something going on right now. And you have Utah, and Utah is but nevertheless, you'll be joining Houston, and you get all these other great schools there. Kansas State's now got basketball. I think it's gonna be a real fun time. And Baylor, how could I forget? Baylor won the championship just a few years ago. So while realignment has annihilated the Pac-12 into the non-existence, we do get, without a doubt, the best basketball conference, and it's going to be a war every single week. And I just can't wait to watch it. So that's my thoughts on the Big 12. Oh, not the Big 12, the Pac-12, which a lot of those schools will now be to the Big 12. But nevertheless, so those are my thoughts on the Pac-12.
I want to ask a question to you guys that watch the Pac-12 a bit more than I do. I'm one of those guys who I think the Mountain West consistently is, maybe not consistently, I would say the past couple of years is better than the Pac-12. That's just my take. I love the Mountain West. Why is it that that the Pac-12 as a whole struggles in the non-conference so much that they lack being able to get teams into the tournament, but then they typically have one or two teams that are able to make a deep run and then look like they are top 14, and that the Pac-12 was underrated all along? Why is that, and why doesn't that happen all year?
That's a great question, and I wish I had a better answer for you. There was one year, I think it was 2020. It was when UCLA made their deep run. At one point, the Pac-12 was like 6-0 in the tournament. That year, I was convinced that they were the worst Power 6 conference by a long shot, and I'm pretty sure they were. So I think, to be honest, a solid chunk of that has to do with just luck. But also, I think there's really solid coaching. I think there's good competition without getting beat up too bad in the Pac-12, to where your teams can really develop and you can learn, but it's not to the point that, if you don't have your best stuff going in, then you're just going to get run out of the building and not get eliminated from any chance of making the tournament in general. But I mean, I think there's an element of kind of coincidence and luck to that, because I do not think